Students, please mute off your microphone. Yes, Harini, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kuman. It's a pleasure to join you all today again. So as already introduced, I'm Dr. Harini Santhanam. I'm an assistant professor with the National Institute of Advanced Studies in Bangalore. And we have a good program on energy, environment, and sustainability at our institute, which I coordinate. So based on what the syllabus is for today's talk, I like to start with introducing sustainability to you all. So what is sustainability? Sustainability is something very basic and core to us, and we understand this actually inherently by ourselves. But to have a course introduce this to us is very, very important to us, because some things we usually take for granted. Even though we know everything, we take for granted. So from that point onwards, the basic point at which we understand sustainability is what is going to build our deeper understanding and also the motivation to do good work in sustainability in future. So starting off, I just like to cover. I think you have a great things to cover in this series of talks. But I would like to start with an introduction. I would like to talk about the principles and goals of sustainable development. What are the global challenges and the pathways? So these are some things that are very, very important for us to follow. So with those introductions over, today we are going to start with the first basic three questions. First question, what is sustainability? What is sustainable development? Are they the same or different, or how different are they? And how do we perceive it? So moving on, first of all, I want to show this very important video to you all. I'm going to play this video. The audio is not very important. The video is very important. Just please let me know if you are not able to see this, so that I can show some screenshots from this video. So just I'm starting this off. I hope you can see it. It's a very important video for all of us to look at. I presume that everybody is able to see this. If there's any issue, please let me know. So this is actually in Thai language. It's a video from Thailand.
Yes, Harini, we are able to see the video.
Okay, great. Thank you.
से अप्रूव हो गया है, वो प्रोसेस में है और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर तभी सर अपने सर के पास है सर, तो हो जाएगा, आज हो जाएगा एक्चुअली, आज कर रहे
I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. Sorry about that. I'm just going to fast forward this a little bit. So the caretaker, she goes away to get something. So actually she tries to open this fruit for them. Just note the way in which the first monkey tries to, go inside even before the task is done. See, they have started eating the peeled portions of this fruit. It's actually a grapefruit. So now she's peeled that away and she's giving some portions of those to the monkeys. And then, she's trying to create an order again, giving this fruit, some portions of this fruit. Look at the very different behaviors of these three monkeys. Very, very different behaviors. So as she tries to put the fruit, it keeps going on like this. And she tries to, put more and more portions of the fruit on their plate. But each monkey, actually, if you see, has a different sort of an attitude to this. Look at the way they're dealing with this food as a resource. Do they have an understanding of what this is about, how to eat this fruit, how to use this fruit? How well are they, looking or perceiving this resource? So we are actually coming to the end of this video. I have actually given the link here. Just fast forwarding this a little bit. Okay. So I hope that everybody was able to see this video. If not, I have actually, as I said, given the link. You can please go there and play this video and see this fully. But what I want to stress upon here is that there is a whole understanding of sustainability from this video. Okay. Now we are seeing three different sorts of individuals here. One individual can be termed as who was on the left side, the monkey on the leftmost side. He can be termed as the impatient consumer who was most distracted through the whole process, right? He was not only distracted, he was also very, very urgently wanted to take the resource for himself. Also he was the least to use it fully and completely, and he was the most to waste it. Now, if you see the monkey number 3, which was on the right-hand most side, he patiently took one slice of that grapefruit, the slice that was, or the portion that was given to him, and he went through it for a long time, right? He explored it completely. So there was some sort of patience in him. He had a strategy. He had an outlook of how to look at that resource, how to consume that, how to use that. So he had some sort of a strategy, or some sort of the way that he performed these tasks was very well taken care of. And if you see, he or she was the one who first fetched the board, also the cutting board. So there is actually the understanding that how to get a resource and how to use the resource with patience. But the one in the middle was the one which was on the wall, typically, literally. He was also distracted by monkey number 1 and monkey number 3. So if we see, there is the attitude of another very core player here, the one of the care provider of these monkeys, who actually begins with some sort of biased notion, because she actually signals monkey number 3 to go get the board, right? So how to fetch that, she knows among the 3 who is going to do the job. So there is a bias in which this resource itself is provided to these monkeys, and this changes or evolves minutely with respect to their reactions, right? So she has to continually, for example, take care of monkey number 1 and keep asking him to sit down, asking him not to get distracted, whereas she didn't have that much effort for monkey number 2 and 3, who huddled together, if you see, in certain parts of this video. So what we are now looking at is that there are indiscriminate and ineffective ways in which we can use available resources, as we have seen very typically in monkey number 1, okay, which is mostly for the benefit, personal benefits, and very less for the benefits of the others. And there are some ways in which even the ways that we use the resources will lead to unsustainable practices. As you can see, he does not consume the resource fully, he just throws it, right, which cannot be used by other monkeys also. The monkey number 3, the patient strategist that we saw, he assesses how the needs can be fulfilled. He understands and learns how to bring about this resource to utility, and also bring about some methodology to achieve it. Slowly he was nibbling at the parts of the grapefruit, if you see. So there was a sustained use of the resource, right? The food that was the resource which was on the plate was not very limited, if you see. It is enough for those 3 monkeys. There was enough resources. But monkey number 2 can either become impatient or become patient, right? But there is no what it signifies is that although he knows that there is resource and he can use it very well, there is no cognition about the future needs. What will happen, right? He wants to also eat the grapefruit. He also threw some on the ground. So we see that most of us are either, we see practices which are mostly unsustainable or middle existence between sustainable and unsustainable. But what we really want is to achieve sustainability. So what we understand from this video and this part of discussion is that resultant lifestyles are a product of consumerism and profiteering mindsets. So to what extent these resultant lifestyles bring about sustainability or unsustainability is in the hands of both individuals and institutions. So I usually show this video in entirety to my class, and we have an elaborate discussion on various aspects of, how these monkey behaviors are very typically correlated to how we see and perceive sustainability. So here I hope that we have had the essence of this video, and having talked about what sustainability from this perspective is, how we perceive sustainability, I just like to you to understand that there are processes, there are means, and there are lifestyles. So all the three together, what gives about how sustainable or unsustainable is any given process or procedure. So now we have to understand that there are three pillars of sustainability. Okay, so there are three factors in general which have to exist in equal harmony to achieve what we are calling as sustainability. Number one is the three aspects. The pillar number one is the society itself. The pillar number two is the economy, and the pillar number three is the environment. If these are together balanced, we achieve a harmony which we call as circular economy. So what are the aspects that each demand of each other? If you say society versus economy, the aspect that we look at from the sustainability perspective is that there should be something called equity. What is equity? Equity in general means equitable distribution of resources. Now, in that example that we saw, there was an equitable distribution of resources, but it did not get accepted in the same way by all the three players, right? There was an equitable distribution. This was for the benefit of the society. The resource was provided and there was equitable distribution, but we were not able to achieve the kind of security which comes with this equitable distribution, which is where the environment and society interlink with each other. When there is no security, it means that there can be no viability. So security in the sense that the environment has certain services that it gives to the society, and the society in turn should provide protection to the environment. So this goes both ways. Only then the pillars of sustainability can stand by themselves very, very strongly. So here we see that environment can be easily be protected by society and environment can be destroyed by society. But in doing so, the society itself loses its security if it destroys the environment, and it actually enhances the standard of living for the society and ensures development if the security is provided. But the security should last for not a short term, but a long term. So herein comes the viability and the interlink between environment and economy. So the viability of the security and equity is very important to support all these three pillars of sustainability in balance, in equal harmony. So when that happens, society takes something from the environment, converts it into useful product. The product fetches the economy or the money or the currency through which the society functions, and it also drives environmental protection and use at the same time in ways in which the environment also is protected in the process. So that actually leads to what is known as circular economy, where environment degradation is stopped, use of environmental services is appreciated. Not only that, there is a lot of recycling and reuse of resources. So this circular economy concept is a very, very critical factor which actually deals with how sustainability can be practiced and it can be sustained itself. Sustainability itself needs to be sustained, the concept, and how it is useful to society. So here now we are defining sustainability as a long-term goal. I said because in a short term, this might not be applicable. So it has to be a long-term goal. For example, making a more sustainable world. That is a long-term goal for us. But there is a small difference between sustainability, which is a perception or a goal, versus sustainable development. So I am giving what is the accepted convention from UNESCO. UNESCO says that sustainable development includes the many processes and the pathways to achieve it. It means sustainability. Example, sustainable agriculture and forestry, sustainable production and consumption, good government, research and technology, technology transfer, research and technology transfer, education and training, etc. So this is what is termed as sustainable development. So we see now that sustainable development is an overarching paradigm of the United Nations, which covers both the processes and the means to achieve the long-term goal of sustainability. So the definitions of sustainability is a part of sustainable development itself. The definition of sustainable development inclusive of sustainability is what we saw in the previous discussion. So now to moving on, we understand from our discussions that sustainability essentially means visions or goals, whereas sustainable development means processes. So the definition is that sustainable development is the best use of available resources in the present as well as in the future for the welfare of all humankind and biodiversity. In fact, the development which goes by this principle of sustainability is known as sustainable development, where we ensure that there is a sustained use of the resources. If we take the three monkeys, if all the three monkeys behave like monkey number 1, you can see that there will be absolutely no resources left at the end of the day for anybody to have. But if most of the population behave like monkey number 2, there will still be wastage. That is where we are right now, right? There will still be wastage. There cannot be resources, very well secure resources for future generations. But if we behave like monkey number 3, for example, where there is a strategy, there is a plan to use resources, manage them thoroughly, bring in the concept of circular economy, where we viability, security, both actually are not compromised in terms of also the equity. So this was what gives the overall sustainable development practice in place. So there is a commission which was formed in 1987, which is called the Brundtland Commission. It recognized the values of sustainable development earlier on. Okay, there in the world we have a lot of global issues which are disturbing us, which are impacting our lives very much. So when we look at those resources and when we look at those issues together, we in 1987, the world global leaders, they brought about a report together based on what is known as 1987 Brundtland Commission inquiry, which brought up the first definition of sustainable development. It was defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. What we have today, if we have a waterfall or if we have a place, a forest that we can enjoy going to, our future generations should also have those resources available. That means we are being equitable. What we receive today, we are passing on to the other generations. If today we are polluting it or using it beyond repair, where we cut down most of the forests which cannot be regenerated in the future, and the future generations don't even have a social, environmental or economic memory of these places, it means that there can be some sort of economic development alone, but there cannot be sustainable development. There cannot be equity in growth, there cannot be inclusivity, and there cannot be justice. So the principle of sustainable development includes all these factors together. So moving on, what actually pushed people towards recognizing the need for sustainable development was that, number one, there was a growing urgency of the sustainable development of the whole entire world. Now, considering that there are several global issues in our in the world, the global societies used a combination of economic development, environmental development, and societal pathways to achieve what are known as sustainable development. But what we found was more and more these kinds of discussions went through, more and more they found that there is a threat, immediate threat from the environmental aspects. If you see, for example, from climate change point of view and environmental vulnerabilities, due not just from natural hazards or natural calamities, but also from anthropogenic causes. So environmental vulnerabilities, environmental calamities, environmental degradation due to natural and anthropogenic factors, as well as these getting enhanced by the threat of climate change itself. These together gave the urgency to develop some sort of plan for sustainable development. So global societies, they thought, they came together. Who are the global societies? It's basically the global nations, okay? And the powerful rulers, I should say, of these nations. They brought together a combination of economic development, environmental sustainability, and social inclusion principles into what are known as sustainable development goals, because these goals were not just goals that they thought would be honored by all the nations and the rulers and the people together, but it was going to be not just powerful in that sense, but also transformative. It means that there was a section of society which there is not just going to be convinced by these principles. Even that sections needed to be convinced that we need some sort of sustainability practices in nature. So we need to convince those people, get them into the plan, and make it an inclusive process of transformation. So transforming from an unsustainable society into sustainable society all through the world at an equal pace. That was the main goal behind having sustainable development as one of the primary factors for achieving what we call as sustainability, or the long-term goal of harmony, right? So moving on, my slide is not moving. Yes. So moving on, there are 4 different dimensions of sustainable development. Number 1, as I told, society, environment, culture, and economy. So we discussed the 3 pillars of sustainability. Now we have a 4th dimension, culture. So why is culture very important, right? So as I told, there is always going to be a section of society which is not going to be convinced that economic development is not the only way to achieve harmony, right? So mostly the accepted thought is that the more money we get, the more the power we can accrue, and more power we accrue, the more kind of influence we can have on the decisions around the world. But it is not going to be sustainable always. There have been very powerful kingdoms, dynasties which have fallen because there has been an element of unsustainability in the way that they practiced the rule, or it can be the way in which the societies were shaped by them, right? It became unsustainable. That is the root cause. So here culture becomes very important. How society and culture influence the way in which society itself looks at environment and economic development as inclusive principles. So the future lies in how environmental, social, economic considerations are balanced in the pursuit of improved quality of life in terms of shelter, food, how we live, the jobs that we do, and how we contribute back to the society. So the global challenges were considered by the United Nations into goals, because they called the goals actually as the blueprint. Okay, so it is a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for everybody. And the vision to achieve this was in the face of, as I told you, all the calamities and the environmental disasters, which actually triggered the more complex and very, very destructive global challenges of poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace, and justice. So if we see here, these 5 very, very important global challenges are present today as well. It's not that since we have started looking at SDGs, we have a perception of SDGs and we have built on, making this vision into a plan. These have all not disappeared, but the blueprint is there to achieve and go over these global challenges. One very important thing that we should notice is that if we look at poverty, inequality, peace, and justice, these are all very much a societal mechanism, right? But these societal mechanisms are actually controlled by two very important environmental mechanisms. One is the environmental degradation or the pollution itself, and the second is what is known as climate change. So those are from this decade, we understand that these are what is actually the most important challenges. Here within poverty and inequality, as social instruments, they are also very much economic instruments which have a direct bearing on how peace and justice is flourishing in different parts of the world. Bhutan, for example, has a high happiness index, but we don't, right? So Sweden, Norway, these are all very well developed regions which give their citizens the benefit of having so much of peace, and the way in which their lifestyles are enhanced by the use of their resources, and they also give back to the society. So there is this circularity in motion. So we have to look and learn from global societies which are actually targeted in terms of having these abilities to push sustainable development forward. So moving on, there is something known as Millennium Development Goals. Okay, so these Millennium Development Goals came before the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals were actually the blueprint, as I mentioned. It took a long time for us to come up with the blueprint. This was ratified on 1st January 2016, the Sustainable Development Goals. So prior to 2016, we had for a decade what we call as Millennium Development Goals. So we have to look at how Millennium Development Goals came about, how they pertain to various aspects of science, and how these were linked to SDGs itself. So first, let us start from the 1987 Brundtland Commission. So as I said, the publication was released in 1987, wherein the global leaders brought together by the World Commission on Environment and Development, they had an investigation around the globe to collect data on what are the global challenges, the ones that we have mentioned, and come about with a report or a publication which they termed as the 1987 Brundtland Commission report, which was also very popularly known as Our Common Future. So this introduced the concept of sustainable development, and it also described how it can be achieved. So the chair of the commission was Norwegian Prime Minister of that time, Gro Harlem. His surname is Brundtland. Gro Harlem Brundtland, under his leadership, a huge commission of global leaders, scientists, basically administrators, scientists, and managers, they explored the causes of environmental degradation. They addressed what are the interconnections between social equity, economic growth, and the environmental problems which did not happen up to that point. So all these challenges were looked at specifically as standalone issues, right? So this actual report brought all these aspects together, and it addressed also the interconnections between them. Now that we see very clearly, even from the example video that we saw, that there is an interconnection. Although these three monkeys seem to be three different individuals, they are interconnected in the way that they use the resources, so that each of their characteristics, the way that they look at it, the way they use it, will impact the other. So here they address the interconnections, and also integrating all these areas of social equity, growth, economic development, and the problems together. They came up with some sort of policy solutions. So this was actually the content of what was known as the Brundtland report. So the Brundtland report gave rise to a set of 8 global goals. They were known as the Millennium Development Goals. They were in operation from 2001 to 2015. So I have listed all the 8 goals. Let us read them together. the first Millennium Development Goal was to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. Okay, so this was considered, the poverty and hunger was considered the foremost issue. Second one was to achieve what was known as universal primary education. So what we saw that poverty and hunger are not standalone mechanisms. It is because people are unemployed. To have employment, you need skills and you need education and you need qualification. So that was connected to education and skill development or capacity development. For that, it had to start with at the primary level. Okay, so it was to achieve universal primary education. Next was to promote gender equity and empower women. That was another very big Millennium Development Goal. Why women? Because women were connected to children, and children were future generations or future citizens who are going to drive the socio-economic mechanism of livelihoods and sustainability. So here, gender equality became a very core issue and focus for the Millennium Development Goals, as well as empowering women. So that in turn, it was connected to reduction in child mortality, so that there was a distinct relationship between these four. If you see, reduction in child mortality is very much connected to poverty, and hunger is very much connected to education. Education itself is connected to promoting gender equality and also empowering women. And women who are empowered were better able to take care of their children, reduction, and themselves, first themselves and their children, which meant in reduction of maternal as well as child mortalities, which was also the way to eradicate poverty and hunger through sustained livelihoods approach. So here, that child mortality and the next Millennium Development Goal, if you see, improve maternal health, went hand in hand with promoting gender equality and empowering the women. Further, the public health aspect that gained a lot of traction during this point. So combating HIV or AIDS, which was perceived to be the #1 disease during that decade, it was very important, as well as malaria and other diseases. So combating HIV, AIDS, malaria, cholera, typhoid, these were at the forefront of the Millennium Development Goals. And these together were very important to give the situation or the circumstances in which the humans could think of ensuring environmental sustainability, and this could be achieved using a global partnership for development. But if you see on the whole, now we talked about social equity, economic development, and environmental sustainability as 3 pillars, right? So the Millennium Development Goals touched slightly on these things. But what left were unaddressed were how the processes, what were the processes that were essential to address or achieve these goals, right? So developing global partnership was good, but there was a discontinuity here, if you see, because to develop a global partnership, first we should start at the local and regional levels. So empowering people at local and regional levels was very important also to achieve the gender equality, empowering of women, improving maternal health, improving, reducing child mortality and improving child health. So those were more a local concern. And here, those local to regional concerns were not very well established. So only through that cycle of ensuring, there is a mechanism from local, regional, sub-regional, and global levels can we ensure environmental sustainability itself in entirety. So this particular Brundtland, you see, this was actually the snapshot of how the United Nations came up with our common future. Now we see that to propose the long-term solutions for bringing sustainable development, there were several other challenges. Okay, so at that time, global warming and environmental problems related to climate change and associated with raising the standard of living of the world's population, that laid the foundation for Millennium Development Goals formulation, which ultimately led to the creation of Sustainable Development Goals. So just prior to the development of these goals, there was a creation of an instrument, a global instrument or a global platform we can call, which was called the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development. Starting from Brundtland, we have seen up to how the UNCSD was created. And the Millennium Development Goals, as I said, was a very good global mobilization effort to achieve a set of some social priorities. Okay, it aimed, as we have seen, to promote global awareness. Mainly, up to that point, there was no accountability. So the political accountability concept to how we achieve economic development, not at the cost of environment, came about at this point. So here, the Millennium Development Goals laid down the foundation for political accountability of all nations. Also, it improved the metrics on some aspects, as we have seen, maternal health, public health aspects, as well as eradicating poverty and hunger. It also gave a way for social feedbacks. But we should understand that all this happened at very higher levels, at global levels or international levels. And also, so were the deliberations, also the feedback and the public pressures that were laid on these platforms. The public pressure itself was not very effective or minimal or not very mobilized at that point of time. But the political accountability concept came in at that point of time, which is a very big turning point. So Millennium Development Goals, they redefined our understanding of the worldwide environmental objectives, which need a higher profile along the poverty reduction objectives, which were the core of Millennium Development Goals. So the Rio 20 summit in June 2012, it recognized the lacuna of the Millennium Development Goals, and a report of synthesizing all these ideas together came about. It recommended that the world should adopt a set of sustainable development goals which were inclusive and which brought about all the lacuna of the MDGs into perspective, so that we can achieve a common platform of goals and protocols for processes which will help us to achieve sustainability. So here we see that SDGs came into existence on 1st January 2016 after the Rio summit concluded in 2012, and it set what was known as the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. It started with this thing. It said that the most important keyword here is transforming our world. So until then, from the beginning, where like monkey number 1, we didn't have an understanding of sustainable practices, we jumped into the the characteristics of monkey number 2 by adopting MDGs and having a very good understanding of their interconnectedness. Now we were transforming into monkey number 3, which meant that we are you're still looking at the agenda to achieve sustainability by 2030. So I given excerpts from this very the UN actually document, which states what these SDGs are. So the SDGs and its targets. Okay, so SDGs come with a set of targets, and these targets come with set of indicators which are integrated. So here I read and I quote, the SDGs and targets are integrated and indivisible, global in nature, universally applicable, taking into account different national realities, capacities, and levels of development, and respecting national policies and priorities. So here we are looking at the very good perspective, taking ahead from the Millennium Development Goals. We have what is new with SDGs is that we had specific targets which were integrated and indivisible. They were the same for all nations in the world and all people in the world. And they were framed in such a way that they also took care of, the resources are not equitably distributed across the world. Some countries have some resources in abundance and other countries have other resources in abundance. So taking into these resources into account, their capacities for development or growth, and also the basic level of development which was in existence at that point in time, the national policies and priorities were set as SDG targets to be achieved. So targets themselves, targets are defined as aspirational and global, with each government setting its own national targets guided by the global level of ambition but taking into account national circumstances. So this is what we have been discussing. So targets here, bringing in the targets, they were defined as aspirational. Okay, so aspirational is something what we aspire for or we want to achieve. So that is aspirational, and that is also global in nature. So what a person in India is aspiring to achieve in the form of SDG is the same, in essence, the same set of goals that a person in, say, Ethiopia or a developed nation is trying to achieve. But the circumstances in India and Ethiopia are going to be different. So the national circumstances will help to set the targets to several dates. Okay, so there is a temporality now, or the time component that we are bringing in. And how each government, I quote again, each government will also decide how these aspirational global targets should be incorporated in national planning processes, policies, and strategies. So, for example, we can say that eradication of poverty by the end of 2025 in India. That is a sort of an aspirational goal. But will we be able to achieve it given the current policies, given the current processes and the strategies that we have at present to achieve it? So this makes us think now, where should the change come for us to achieve this target? This 2025 is not a target that the UN sets for India. It is a target that it encourages India to set for itself. So in that way, India set a target that 100% electrification of India, that has been achieved by 2011. Okay, so that was an aspirational target that India set for itself and achieved. So there are several targets like this which the countries were encouraged to take up on their own and to also achieve them. So it is also, again I quote, it is important to recognize the link between sustainable development and other relevant ongoing processes in the economic, social, and environmental fields. So this is a global statement. So this was what the essence of SDGs were about, to achieve what we know as transforming our world, the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So I'm going to quickly show all the sustainable development goals. We have been talking about these goals for a long time now, but what are those goals, right? So the goal number 1, there are a set of 17 global goals, and the goal number 1 is prescribing what is known as no poverty. So each of these goals have a theme, okay, which denotes what the targets and indicators which come under these goals are about. So the theme for SDG 1, this is how we tell them, SDG 1 is no poverty. So goal number 2, SDG 2 is called zero hunger. Goal number 3, good health and well-being. And SDG goal number 4, quality education. So here you see no poverty and zero hunger and good health and well-being. So these actually also transformed from the Millennium Development Goals that we saw earlier. They are put into more specific perspectives here. First goal, let us achieve that there is no poverty. Second goal, let us also achieve that zero hunger. Goal number 3, good health and well-being. The one thing is that these are not linear. Okay, you don't start from 1, 2, 3, 4. We are not going in a linear fashion. All these are equally. At the same time, we have to achieve all these equally. Now, why I group all these 4 together is that, again, we have a local to individual level perspective of these SDG goals 1 to 4. It is a part of every human being's life, where the human being itself has an impact on how these goals are achieved. So from local to global level, these 4 goals are clubbed together to achieve the main parts of livelihood or existence for humans. That is, without poverty, without being hungry, having good health, and having education. So these are the 4 primary aspects of these goals. Now, if we look at the second group of SDG goals, SDG number 5 deals with what is known as gender equality. SDG 6 deals with clean water and sanitation. SDG 7 deals with affordable and clean energy. And SDG 8 deals with goals for decent work and economic growth. So these 4 set of goals, if you see, are rise above the basic goals, for any human being. Here, what we are trying to achieve is more of social equity and environmental protection together. How social equity? By ensuring that there is gender equality, and also by ensuring that there is decent work and economic growth opportunities for everybody in the society. So now we have transformed from local as well as individual level to more of a societal level. Okay, at a national level, societal and national level. Here we take stock of what all the water resources that we have, the sanitation processes that we have. We also take stock of the energy options we have. Are they will be non-renewable or renewable? We have these energy options, we have the resources, and we have the human resources. How does the society deal with the human resources? How equitable are the distribution of these resources, and how well planned do we use these resources to generate energy which help us to achieve in turn decent work and economic growth. So this cluster of these 4 goals is very important advancement from the basic set of goals. Now, if we move on, the next 4 set of goals, if you see SDG number 9, which deals with industry, innovation, and infrastructure. SDG number 10, which deals with reduced inequalities. SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. And SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. So now we have the human resources who have their own needs satisfied. We have societies where who have taken stock of their resources, and they have plans to use those resources to produce energy and also, give livelihoods. Now we have the industries and the communities coming together for achieving what? First is to create infrastructure to sustain these processes. So here, innovation and infrastructure, which forms a major part of industrial development, is achieved by SDG number 9, which should lead to, see, it is not just actually economic development. We are telling ourselves we need to use this space, this infrastructure, these industries to reduce the inequalities between human beings, which in turn will, influence the first cluster of 4 goals that we talked about, where every human does not die of hunger, does not live in poverty, has the access to good health facilities, healthcare facilities, and is able to have the access to education. So by goal number 10, we are linking that to cluster number 1. So in this cluster, it also reduced inequalities will also be achieved by having responsible consumption and production, which is SDG number 12. So responsible consumption production processes are also part of SDG number 9, if you see, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So there is so much interconnectedness between these goals. And only when 9, 10, and 12 are realized, okay, so the targets are realized, we come to achieve what we call as sustainable cities and communities. So from individual societal, we have come to a community level, and the next set of goals take us from a community level perspective, or a national level perspective, I should say, to a global level perspective. Here we are addressing the major factors which will influence the rest of the clusters of SDGs that we have seen earlier. What are those? SDG number 13, which specifies climate action. SDG number 14, which deals with life below water. SDG number 15, which deals with life on land. SDG number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And SDG number 17, partnership for the goals. So if we see 16 and 17, they very much are similar to the last 2 goals that we saw in Millennium Development Goals cluster, right? So they are strong instruments which are there for socio-economic equity and security. But for climate action, life below water, and life on land, these 3 SDGs are very much connected with how we deal with the issues, global issues of climate change, land degradation, and also pollution. So this is actually a very important set of goals which actually have a narrative from local up to global levels. Okay, and the targets and indicators for each of these SDGs, as I told you, are very, very important perspectives, which gives us the much needed clarity on where should we start from and how we deal with these issues. So if you see these three different, the different clusters of SDGs, and also the way in which we deal with these SDGs are very much interconnected, number one, and they are very, very exclusive, right? And they're at the same time very inclusive, and they are very, very exhaustive. So these four aspects make SDGs very, very robust plans for achieving sustainability. So if we see the UN 2030 agenda, as I spoke, stresses on the fundamental role of science in implementing these 17 SDGs, which is endorsed by the global community. The question here is, how can and should researchers, scientists respond to this societal demand on science so that it can be carried forward by the administrators and the managers? So this means there should be a systematic engagement with the fundamental aspects of these SDGs. There is what we call it the normative dimensions. Okay, so normative dimensions are the actual or practicable set of solutions or processes or plans that a community or a society has or a nation has to engage with the 2030 agenda and those of the scientific community. So it means that production of knowledge about the baseline characteristics, what is in existence, and the way or the processes that we have to achieve the targets. So those production of knowledge relevant to these aspects is very, very important, which means that there should be an analytical engagement with the norms and the values through these four important tasks. So if you see here, I want to show this slide just to show how many number of indicators and targets are there for every goal, as well as you can see how they are distributed. So now if we take, at a first shot, you can easily see the orange bars, they denote how many targets are there for each of the SDGs that we just discussed. And the green bars show what are the number of indicators. So the highest number of indicators are to SDG number 3. Okay, so first we have poverty, hunger, but well-being, health and well-being takes the most priority. And the least number, if you see, for across different SDGs is SDG number 7. So if we quickly go back, I can just tell you SDG 7 deals with clean energy, right? So SDG number 3 is good health and well-being, and SDG number 7 is affordable and clean energy, as is also mentioned here. But this actually triggers for sustainable society and communities, right? So energy has become the forefront of the global revolution right now. So we cannot say that SDGs, the targets and indicators are very exhaustive. They are also evolving in nature. That is what I want to point out here. So when they were formed, SDG number 7 had the least number of targets and indicators, but it also means that not having the least number of targets doesn't mean, there is less work to do on this SDG. It can also mean that there is more clarity on what we need to achieve, and hence the investments from both the society and the economic aspects have to be more made on this energy part. So if we see, they're also not equitably distributed. There are indicators and targets. The perspective that we should have now is whether targets balance indicators. Indicators, what do they show? They indicate the way in how these targets are being met. So if we have equal number of targets and indicators, as you can see with the example of SDG number 10, or you can say SDG number 14, which has 10 indicators and 10 targets specifically, we can be able to, the assessment procedure or the framework becomes easier. When there are more complex number of targets and indicators, this takes a longer time, and there is also more discussions which are required to adjust, also to accept, and also, try to perceive how well these SDGs are being met. So with this, actually, do we still have time, Dr. Kuman, to take the discussion forward today, or should I, go back tomorrow for the rest of the lecture?
We can take discussion today itself for the today's part, right? That would be better. Okay.
Okay, sure. So
Okay,
then
so-
I will stop here and be happy to answer some questions that the class has. And we'll continue with principles and understanding the goals of sustainable development in tomorrow's session.